Well, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well, getting prepared for my trip
Yes,
on
yes.
one day. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. This is the Today Show here on the Disability Channel. I'm Dr. Laurie Davis, your host, and my co host, Dr. Ramin Modiri. Today, we're doing episode 2 because last week we started 3 episodes on the gang life. And we are expecting a guest. He's not here yet, but in the meantime, we'll continue our conversation because in doing so, we realized, specialized communities, there's quite a few of us out there. So uh, we know how to make it roll. So over to you. You're going to Iran. That is your homeland. That is a community in itself. But before we get into that, we had a question, didn't we? You shared we had a question last week that we were going to ask our guests. I also have a guest booked for next week as well, but over to you for that question, what we were wondering.
Right. I mean, I think that's the number one question, at least in my mind. Why would anyone choose? Well, when you think about gangs, why would they choose to become a member of the gang? And it will take us to a bigger picture. Why would, like, you had a good question, why would anyone choose to be a member of a cult? Or we talk about, I mean, it can apply to any kind of community, but what is it? What is the culprits? What are the factors that, it's a belonging to a community? So I thought that would be my first question to our guest. Why, for instance, he chose to, choose to belong to a gang. And that was, I think, gives us uh, a lot of opening in a way of understanding why we strive to be part of a bigger picture. As a human beings, we are a social animal. So I think that might be one of the things, or the sense of belonging. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that would be my question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And of course, one of the conditions of that I know about just from the work I've done, I'll go from that perspective
Mhm.
based on working with ex gang members, former gang members, and what they shared with me. So it's kind of third party, but it's factual and it's part of what I have heard and learned. Um, but believe it or not, we know that you are our financial expert. And one of the reasons that people join is poverty
Mhm.
and the lack of resources, the lack of maybe there's no food in the home, maybe there isn't a home, maybe they're moving from one room to the next with the mom. So that whole lack of prosperity, that poverty, that insecurity, that's one big reason. So maybe you can enlighten us a little bit about how you could see poverty driving somebody into another community, such as a gang.
Mhm. Very valid point, especially now with the influence of the social media on what you see, but even the, the kind of empowerment of, you look at some of these even music videos and how the gang culture and mentality is there, hanging a big clog, a gold necklace, or there's a lot of different things that symbolizes that, becomes a symbol of prosperity in a way, at least from the money side of things. So young kids see that, they think, well, that's easy money. I don't have to go to school. I don't have to get any education. I see so and so at age 22, 23, 24 doing this. There's like drug lords at such a young age. They have these mansions. You look at some of these movies, you see they're driving, their Lamborghini or, the Ferraris. Wow, I like to have that. And I don't have to answer to anyone in a way of expectations of the family, if there is any. So, unfortunately, of course, we talked about last week, there's a lot of obviously setbacks on that because nobody really makes money. They are the foot soldiers. They
Mhm.
basically, if they're lucky, they make $3 or $4 an hour, or that, because they have to be very special and they have to earn their keeps to get to that part that they see in the movies. So there's other misleading, but again, we are hopeful animals in a way. We love to look at the positive things. So we say, why not me? So if out of 1,000, it would be me who's going to make those millions of dollars. I'm going to have mansion, those beautiful women or men and kinds of, because we have females who join the gangs and they
Yes.
love to be part of, you know, they see partying and all that. So yes, absolutely, prosperity or the poverty, I would say, plays a huge role. And of course, they don't have a good role models. Generally, like I'm sure you will go into that, as far as a family, there isn't a role model. A lot of times there's no father to become a role model. So this becomes their role model, the movies, the music videos, the people that they know, they think they're successful. And unfortunately, you know, in this situation, they're gang members.
Mhm.
And that's how it becomes attraction. Again, the first thing is like they think it's easy money. So, and the
Yeah.
belonging and power. Unfortunately, at least 9 out of 10, that doesn't work that well. And as I said, if once our guests join this, you know, it ends up in a really bad place.
Yes.
You know, a lot of them. So, yeah, I think that's probably one of the reasons.
Definitely. Another one is family dynamics. I've heard a lot of stories about how there was no family per se. You know, it's
Mhm.
a split family. It's dysfunctional. It's dissected. It's I've got that brother over there with that mom, and then my mom had a baby with that guy over there, and so there's all of this sibling dysfunction, family dysfunction, and there's no unit per se. And we also like to belong, like you said earlier, to something bigger. So that would explain why people join different things,
Mhm.
whether it's church, maybe it's a network marketing company, maybe it's a gang, maybe it's a cause. And so we step into those places. As someone told me, we were of the herd mentality, horses. We have to have people around us. So to feel validated or to feel loved. And a lot of times these kids that join the gangs are seduced. Just, can you believe it, as you would say, a bag of chips and a can of pop. And it starts there. And that's how they get seduced into doing a run or whatever. It doesn't take much, especially if they're really vulnerable. So those dysfunctional families can drive kids to the gang family or any other kind of family, actually. Do you have any comments on that? Can you see
Yeah,
where that?
valid, very valid points. And I think that takes us to also the power of influence. And again, like you mentioned, it's not just uh, in gangs or cults, or it could be careers. It could be like military. If you have a cousin, an older brother, and we like to follow that there is this idealism, and we see them. So there's a very good chance that a lot of people who join gangs, they had their maybe older brother, or even the father who's in jail, was part of that, although they despise that, but it's easier role to follow. They say, well, I'm not going to make this mistake. Oh, he got caught. Oh, I'm going to make sure I'm not going to do that. So they still go to that path to prove, let's say, to their parents that they are better. And then cousins, you know, there's a lot of ways. And again, it happens in any career. Like I mentioned, it could be military in a way that they see and they like to follow that path. So I think that also plays that family dynamics that you mentioned. It could also work that way too. Um, and again, there's the things that the form of, like you mentioned, the belonging, and an older brother, cousin will protect them and they will become part of that. And like you mentioned about network marketing, it is about recruiting all the time.
Mhm,
And we
mhm.
talked about the business of how what we can learn from gangs last week. We talked about that. It's like they are very good recruiters. They know the weaknesses. They know how to, you just mentioned the, you know, bag of chips. Here we go. So that's
Mhm.
how it's done. And I remember this is in 1980s, and I grew up in Connecticut, and I started my career there. In middle schools, they would distribute these uh, the stamps, and they would put whatever it was on the stamps. So the kids, when they started licking, they would feel pretty good. They would give them this free, they say, oh, look at these stamps. And once you lick it, it's like, and just by stamps, they would get them hooked, and then they would give them free. And these are middle schools, 12-year-olds,
Wow.
13-year-olds. And this is Connecticut. At that time, Connecticut was been one of the richest, if not the richest state at that time in
Hmm.
the United States. And
Hmm.
these are upper middle class kids. And that's how they get them hooked. And then you will have the dealers, and they're always like 2 or 3 miles outside the
Hmm.
city, and then they come closer. So this goes back to 1980s.
Hmm.
So again, goes back what you said, can and a bag of chips. That's how
Hmm.
they hook them. And in this case, yeah.
Yeah. Another area that has been shared with me is the fact that a lot of them were brought up in the welfare foster care system. So I had one client, he was 18. By the time he was 3, he had been in 36 foster homes. And like, then they wonder why our young people are all messed up, right? So foster care can be good. Some kids land in a good place, but a lot of them don't. And so then they have this idea that the only way out is to run away.
Mhm.
So I'm going to run from this situation that I'm in because this is not safe. They're being sexually assaulted or physically abused or neglected. And so they need a place to run to. And so the gang life is the perfect place to land because they're very good at what you just shared, making you feel like you belong, that you have a family, that this is the family that you don't have, that you've never had. And you can just imagine some of the manipulation that goes on to uh, inspire, if you will, that recruit to come in and join that family. So it's really for many of them, and I've heard this on many, many occasions, it's about that because everybody wants to be part of a family. Everybody wants to have a family. It's our birthright to have a family or be in a family. So we have that issue going on as well. So a lot of our kids who are in foster care, that's almost like I'm going to go outside the box here and say, what a wonderful breeding ground for the gang life.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent point. And talking about breeding ground is also, they're very smart that they look at the teenagers going through the puberty is bad
Mhm.
enough, and it's about identity.
Mhm.
These kids want to have their own identity, and a lot of them, they run away when they're 14, 15. There's a little discussion, and it doesn't really have to be just from power, which his majority is, but even affluent family have the same problem because of that self-identity, proving to the parents that they are um, the adult in a little body, and the body is growing. But so unfortunately, once they make that decision, like you said, they run away. Now they are a prime, again, candidates, because where do they go? And I'm in California, so of course LA and California is a big uh, destination for a lot, because if the weather is good, so a lot of them come here. There are a lot of teenagers, they go to Las Vegas, or they come to California, to Los Angeles, and unfortunately they have nowhere to go. And I worked with for 25 7 maybe 27 years with organizations with they work with the runaway kids, but they're very small. I mean, the kids, all you need is somebody says, well, I offer you food, or I offer you for one day or 2 days, a sanctuary, some place for
Yeah.
housing and shelter. That's all it takes. And the rest, as you know, it's history, especially with females. And
Mhm.
then, and you see, and you've talked a lot about that, like say, missing people, missing children.
Mhm.
Well, the identities are not there, and that's why you don't see them. And unfortunately, a lot of these kids disappear because nobody knows who they are. So it's a lot easier to control them. If they don't go with what they're told, unfortunately, God knows
Mhm.
what happens to them. And
So let's talk about the aftermath. So now I'm in the gang. Okay,
Mhm.
I've been recruited, and I've got a lot of reasons going on um, why I want to be there, and I've chosen to be there. And
Mhm.
in the moment, it looks like my only alternative, just like suicide. You know, people who take their own life at that time, in that moment, they have themselves convinced that that is their only option.
Mhm.
So I think our kids who are being invited or recruited, they'll be successful with the kids who believe that that is their only option. Now they get into the gang, and you know they start running drugs, or they start doing whatever. Now they're on the drugs themselves. So now we've got that next problem coming up, the next leg of their life, becoming an addict. And I always say, nobody was born saying, when I grow up, I'm going to be an addict.
Right.
When I grow up, I'm going to be a criminal. Nobody says that or even has that desire. But circumstances and situations, when they present themselves, we are capable of doing anything, even killing somebody else. We're capable of that if the situation arose. So I know that now it compounds. So now I'm an addict, and now I'm really vulnerable because now I need my next fix. And what am I going to do to get my next fix? And that's when you have now elevated ourselves into the sex trade. Now I've got to have sex with that dealer in order to get my next fix. I learned many years ago that if the young woman is on the street, it'll take 5 years to get her off the streets. That's how much work it takes if they make it 5 years. So now I'm in the drugs, I'm in the habits that support my drug habit. And so now I'm becoming a criminal because now I watch the LA news, and when I see now, it's not one or two people going into a store to rob a store, is it? It's like this whole group of people. I see it on the news every day going into a store and taking like 3 minutes. Only takes 3 minutes for this whole group to clean out a store. So now I'm into crime. And if I do get caught and charged, I land in jail. And I don't know what happened with our guest. Something must have come up because he was more than excited to be here and share that part of his story. So then you end up in jail. Now, what's in jail? More gangs. What are some of those shows we've watched? Prison shows, Shawshank Redemption, you name them. Escape from Alcatraz. I love those prison shows because I watch them all the time, and you see that going on. And it's about power and then death, ultimately an early death. So any connections there that you might want to comment on, because you're right in the middle of it down there in LA, for sure. You don't live in LA, but you're pretty darn close.
No, totally. Yes. I mean, it's interesting how I live in Orange County, but you just go a little farther and you see even Northern Orange County. You go to, especially in LA County, they're huge. And it's like you mentioned, once you start that path, number one, it is a protection, like you mentioned. So that's what we have the group stuck together. So that's the sense of security and safety. And some of the movies you mentioned, there's like a Wire and Orange is New Black or something like that. So it's like there are a lot of movies that uh, they really concentrate on that. So I agree that that becomes almost a destination, and you cannot get out of it. Once you got in, it's very difficult to leave. So that's and if you, the studies show, once the gang, members come out, generally they will have probably average of 3 times they go back to jail. So they need that sense of belonging to stay safe. So because they know they're going back. So that's another thing. Another thing you just mentioned about that 5 years, there have been studies done, and I've seen, especially with young girls, the rate of suicide
Mm,
of any group is the highest. It's that self value is out the door, and you can deal. It's not even the physical pain; it's that emotional and mental pain. I think you had you had mentioned before, even in the rape, it's not that physical. It's that shame, but also that emotional and mental suffering that keeps people forever. You know, they say, "Well, get over. It happened." As if like, no,
no.
it's a last. They said that mental abuse is,
Mhm,
again. I think you have mentioned it. Mental abuse is worse than physical abuse, or emotional abuse is worse than
mhm,
physical. So, but I've seen that even even in the industry, the film industry, if there's been something, the chance of suicide is much, much higher, or chance of death is much, much higher. So this has a, a long lasting effect. Even after 5 years they get out, it probably takes many, many years of, I don't know if I put it under therapy or self actualization, understanding to get out of that. And it affects their relationships. uh, they love to have family. It affects them to have not have families a lot of times because they don't want that suffering for their children. So you're looking at the generations
mhm,
that one little mistake or one little thing they did as a teenager, what a lasting effect it has. So,
mhm,
yeah.
mhm. Absolutely. And, having worked with these guys and gals, the whole dynamic of how to get out, and then, and I wish our, we do have a guest next week too, but how traumatic the course of events are as they're traveling through that path from the first day they enter that gang system until they actually get out of it. Getting out is way harder than getting in to that lifestyle, right? But we are going to talk too about the fact that if you don't join a gang, you might join something else. And I have this saying that if you don't believe in something, you'll fall for anything. So we have other kinds of cultures and communities that people join because it's a sense of family, a sense of belonging. So if we look at the cult system, that would be another one. Different religious orders that people belong to. And there's, like the gangs, there's very strict rules. And that's something that you have an interest in, is the structure and the efficiency and the way that gangs operate. So do you want to comment on that? We talked a little bit about that last week, but let's expand on that, because anything that we join has rules if we think about it, whether it's a church religious organization, a political organization, a cult, um, different ethnic cultures, we all have rules.
Absolutely. And I go even beyond that. There is a system. There is actually system about how the hierarchy works, what to follow. And that is how the recruiting happens, because recruiting likes order. So I, as someone new coming into something, once I see these steps, it's a lot easier to visualize that I can be successful. But when there's anarchy, there's a mishmash, somebody has a great idea and puts few people together and they're all excited, and then but there is no plan, there is no system. And I'm going even for the system means it's structured. You mentioned about the rules are part of that. The structure is about the whole movement as far as the plans, how we get where we want to get, who has the responsibility, what we need to do. Or do we have meetings every week? Do we have meetings every other day? And it is a consistency, and that what makes it very important. So, for instance, we talk about gangs. They know, for instance, if they are uh, racketeering, they're going to the businesses every Thursday morning. They're going to this laundromat or whatever. They know at 8 o'clock they have to go collect that money. So it's not like one day is like, oh, I forgot at 12, and they get punished. So they have that discipline. And it happens in military. In military, we are very structured. The rules are very much set that you do not deviate. And one of the things we like to have in life is the clarity. And that's one thing, again, in my world, which is in investing and other things, people do things randomly and they wonder why they did not succeed. They watch these movies, they say, oh my God, so and so is a billionaires. Or they watch, the news. How did they? Well, because they paid a price for that. They had a discipline. They avoided, while you were partying, they were, working on the thing. So it was not just the emotional reactions to things. They actually followed, like you said, the rules and the system. So it happens in any successful business. But once there's no clarity, that's when the businesses fail. That's
Mhm.
where the societies fail. That's when there's a, we have uh, unfortunately, it happens even in a wealthy communities. You have people working, in Wall Street. They're portfolio managers, or they live in Southern California or in Hamptons, and they're making $10 million a year. All right, we'll say, well, that's pretty successful. But the next door neighbor has much bigger mansion, and he or she is making $50 million a year. You feel you are not successful, you feel very inadequate. So you basically goes back, one thing you mentioned about comparison. It's not even competition, it's more of a comparison. And you could have gone from degrees from Harvard, from Yale, and you still think, well, this guy is more successful than I am. And that affects your whole family dynamics. Now your attitude toward your spouse is different, toward your children is different, toward your coworkers is different, because you want to. So it has not just, again, limited to a gang world or the cult world. It happens in any part of the society. It happens with ethnicities. Now, one of the reasons I don't want to pinpoint this, but it is very important. And so, from the religious point of view, when we look at the Judaism and with Jewish religion, they are very close knit. They are very supportive of each other. They have, one of their rules is obviously tithe. They give money away. They help every member of their community. On the other hand, you have a lot of successful other groups that they go to the parties together. They love to have, the social events, but they do not support each other because it's all about comparing and competition. So you see around the world, we see some societies, some of the most successful civilizations, they have fallen apart because everybody wants to prove that they are better than the others. Everyone wants to prove that they are better than, from knowledge wise. They have more degrees. They're more intelligence. They're wealthier, rather than that close knit community. And that's what the gangs offer. On the other hand, they bring that close knit, the sense of belonging. And while we have a lot of successful individuals that their communities are not successful. So,
Right.
and again, I just want to pinpoint, because
Yeah.
I've been involved with the Jewish community. I know how they really support. It happens in the Sikh community, with the Indian, sect of religion. There are big groups in Canada, for instance, in Vancouver. they support each other. They support each other's business. If there's a business, they go to that business to buy things. If there's someone have to do from financial advice, they go to that person because they want to support. But majority of groups, they do not do that. So, and that's another sign of success for any community, but also the individuals who want to be successful. They know they will have a backup, the support. But when they know they are not, they really rely on themselves. They become a good candidate to get into involved with
Mm-hmm.
different sects or cults or gangs, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Totally true. And I know that from the work that I've done in some special communities as well, that let's say somebody in the community opens up a coffee shop, but they're still all driving 20 miles down the road to get their coffee
Yeah.
because they don't want to see that person in the community be successful.
Yeah.
Well, there's something wrong with that. That to me, there's something missing here. And I know too, I worked in the Jewish community as well. And for example, if I was a hairstylist in my community and I'm the Jewish woman in the community doing hair, every woman goes to that person.
Mhm.
They don't go outside and get their hair done somewhere else. You support. So we have a lot to learn about that. Um, we have a lot to learn from gangs. We have a lot to learn from some of these specialized communities that are, are doing things that would make life better, make the world a better place. And the stories that our gang clients, former gang clients, have shared with us. None of them really, really, really in their heart, in their deepest place, their soul wants to be there
Yeah.
at all. So for me, that's about our consciousness, our level of consciousness that we don't really want to hurt other people innately, intuitively, however you want to put that. So behind that, it's like, let's talk a little bit about how we know our systems are broken. I hear that a lot. And just recently with my surgery and everything, everybody said, "Oh my gosh, you were 10 days in the hospital. That must have been terrible." And I went, "No, the system is broken, but there are good people in the systems." And I think that's what we're not recognizing with our kids that are in trouble, our guys who are in jail, our gals who are in jail. Innately, there's good people there, but the systems are broken, and they're forced to practice their skills within those systems. So I was grateful to be in the Alberta healthcare system twice now in the last 4 years and was treated like royalty. And I have to put a plug out there for that because they get so much negative press, just like the gangs, if you think about it. Excuse me. So, yeah, let's talk about broken systems. Is there one out there that's totally efficient and totally, like, even in the financial industry? Let's talk a little bit about the rules and regulations there. They're really strict.
Right. So sometimes unfortunately the rules and regulations becomes the bureaucracy. And what happens now, you're a new business, you want to start a business, and what happens is there's just so many things that it discourages you to do this. Fortunately, United States is more open. We don't have as much, but except like in the financial industry. You go to Brazil, it's about 3 years ago when I was studying, and it's like 364 days to get your permit. Here, you want to start a business in California, you go, you register within 24 hours, everything is published. You got to send it to publish, but you still can go to a bank and say, well, listen, I want to start my business. So you can have a business account. In Singapore, it's about 4 days. So Singapore is one of the most successful communities or the countries in the world when it comes to that. So basically, yes, and the regulations are important. The problem is goes back even with regulations. There are more ways at taking advantage or disadvantage of these things because of the bureaucracy. Now you have so many layers that the
Mm.
chances of corruption, and it doesn't have to be intentional, it's the fall of the system. And I give you, we're talking about the system and where does it start. So again, we're talking about gangs, and they could be one of the cleanest in a way if I compare to some of the governments around the world, how they operate. The governments, some of them are biggest gangs, but at least with the gangs, you have, as I mentioned, you have a clarity. With the governments, you don't. You don't know who is behind it, how many hands are, because language, they're greased to do things. And I give you one simple thing. In United States, how the system can be taken advantage of. And we look at authorities as the clearest or the cleanest, especially United States, a free world, that it's a superpower. Uh, let's talk about inflations. Now you go to the grocery, and I know average person goes and buys eggs and says, "Holy sugar, this is it's doubled." I mean, I know it happened, the eggs, and I know I just went to Costco. I'm like, 4 years ago, I remember how much I paid and how much I'm paying today. The government comes and says, no, the inflation is under control. We're coming down. It's wonderful. And, United States, we started in 1980. We call it the Consumer Price Index, which not the globally kind of everybody follows. You have a basket of goods. And basket of goods is you pick and choose like your food items. Let's say it's the sugar and flour and wheat and or bread, let's say. And then you have gasoline, you have your shelter. So the government says, well, we put this basket, it's 100 today, $100. We take a picture a year from now, how much it has gone up, and that becomes your CPI. The problem is they constantly change that. They say, well, the sugar is $1, and next year became $1.20. Let's say it went up 20%. You know what? You can buy Selendra or a substitute. It went up 5%. So sugar is up 20%, but the substitute was up 5%. So you as a consumer, you could have bought that. So they replace one, so it shows, well, it went up 5%. So what happens? The inflation stays low because why? Two reasons. It makes the government and the politicians look good because inflation is one of the worst things could happen in any nation because people have their hard-earned money, but they have to live off that whatever income they get. So if the government says no, inflation is good, then you have to believe it. So that's one of them. And the politicians can talk about that. So, and they've changed this basket so many times. And the major ones are your shelter, your home, your house. So they say, well, your house, if you were going to rent this, how much you will collect. Let's say you own your house. So they use these different rules. So number one is politicians, especially, elections happen quite often now. In the United States, every 2 years, we have the Congress. Every 4 years, we have presidential. But there's a bigger picture, and it goes back to how the systems can be broken. And when you have this trust and authorities, that's when the lack of trust comes in. So in the United States, and I know in Canada, the same way, we have Social Security, retirement funds, that it's over $1.5 trillion is retirement. But you also have veterans benefits. You have the food stamps or the food programs. You have shelter, the housing programs. All of these, they get adjusted for inflation every year. So I'm getting a Social Security $1,000 a month, a year in the United States, September. United States, CPI was 2%. So we're going to give you $20 extra. But I know my eggs went up 20%. So what is that 2%? So the government's, again, I'm using United States. The government is saving trillions of dollars, or at least billions of dollars, by not giving you, I would say billions of, not the trillion, but billions of dollars, by not giving you the actual true inflation adjusted or inflation increase in your benefits, and that's how they save money. So that's how the system can go around things. Yes, there's a CPI, everybody follows it, but that's not the reality. That's why they
Mhm.
manipulate things. So here is like the biggest organization. I mean, everybody trusts in US government. We buy their bonds. But that's how the system can really take advantage of what they're doing. So it goes back to all you need is uh, basically, again, the layers get broken. And I know I started working as a young man when I was going to university. I worked for the state. I was part of, I would work at the university while I was, trying to pay for my tuition and everything. At the end of the fiscal year for the state, if there was a surplus, they will call me and say, "Oh, Ramin, we have a month to go. Why don't you go like do nothing? I'm like, just turn the screw around. Oh, we will pay you extra over time," because they didn't want to lose that money because that was part of the budget. So all of a sudden, here I'm like at 19 years old. I'm making so much money in summertime because they needed me to make sure, or there's the fiscal year is end of June or March, right? I think it's end of June.
Mhm.
So if I'm starting in June, I'm painting things, I'm getting double pay. As a young
Mhm.
man, I was looking at my social security number. I made so much money going to school because I was doing a lot of different jobs, but working for a state. So what I'm saying is the system creates those loopholes, but also I don't want to say corruption, but at least those advantages that can be taken. So it's a wrong. If no, but so now the people who are the hierarchy in the university, they knew the system, how to take advantage of it. So they knew how to play the game, and that's how the things work. So, but going back to the good system, uh, if you know that, you have clarity.
Mhm.
It's the right system. You look at McDonald's exactly the same thing, the way it operates, the way the fries are in the microwave, whether it's in Istanbul, Turkey, or Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, or in Des Moines, Iowa. They do exact same thing. That's called clarity. That's called a system.
Mhm.
Nobody deviates that from that. So if I'm getting a franchise of $2 million for McDonald's, I know exactly what to expect. So I'm not going to be, oh, I want to do this creative. Except like when you go to India, for instance, there's like a lot of vegetarians, so they respect that. But other than that, there's a
Mhm.
clarity, and that's what the gangs are really good. Each one of them, they have their codes, the codes of supposedly honor. I don't know what the honor in there, but they have their own codes. And the last thing, I know time is running out, but one thing I would say, going back to exactly what you said about conscious, I believe as human beings, we were born, majority, I would say 95, 97%, we are good. God does not create a bad human beings. That's my outlook. And we look at children, we think of angels, the purity. And unless you watch the movie like Omen, that's a different story. But other than that, there is no devil in. But majority of our, we are good-hearted. We want to be doing good for our surroundings. It's the environment and what is happening, the influences make us bad. So you said none of us we want to say, well, I'm going to be a criminal, I'm going to kill people. The only problem is once you pass that barrier, you cross that, you kill the first person, you're a criminal. So it's a lot easier to kill 10 more people.
That is correct.
And that's the problem with the gangs. As a human, if the youngsters want to get into that, once you cross that path, is very difficult to reverse it.
Mhm.
But you
Mhm.
already see yourself as one. So that's why there's a lot of sociopath, and they do one bad thing and then they continue because, hey, I'm going to be punished anyway. So why not?
Yeah.
Just do
Well,
more.
it accelerates, right? And it gets
Absolutely.
deeper and darker and deeper and darker.
Absolutely.
But mentioning about, being born good people, we are. There was a bank that did a study on um, banking machines. And when people, um, you go to the banking machine, maybe you forget to take your card,
Mhm.
or you forget, you don't remember to put the cash in your wallet because you're busy taking care of the card. Anyway, 97% of the public takes that card or that cash back into the bank and says, I found this card in the machine, or I picked up this cash and it's not mine. But I do want to digress a little bit about back to gangs, and how would you consider? I mean, this is a question for anybody and everybody. Um, the mobs, which still exist, they are a form of gang life, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Right. And they have little fronts, like the little laundromat or the antique store on the front, and they're doing all their business in the back, right? Third party money laundering, etc. Yeah. And they take care of their own. And if you've done the right things, you get rewarded. And if you've done the wrong things, you don't get rewarded. They take care of their own either way it goes out, don't they?
Absolutely. That's a great point. Again, they also, again, their hierarchy, the strict rules, they follow that. Either you're in or you're out. There is
Yeah.
no gray area with them.
No.
And it has always amazed me. Some of the, we watch the movie, we look at The Godfather, and
Oh, yeah.
in New York, it's all real. I mean, when I was younger, that's another story. There was this up and coming in Providence, believe it or not, of all the places, it is the capital of mafia, and nobody knows that. But everybody thinks about New Jersey and New York. It's Providence, Rhode Island, is where
Whoa.
that's where you find the best Italian food, by the way. And I've
Okay.
been to these restaurants with the bullet holes on the wall, but nobody locks their car doors because they know they will not dare to touch that car when you
Oh,
go to those restaurants. So uh, basically, going to that, it's very interesting. You again watching it. They're such a loving grandfather. This they
oh,
love their family, their wives, and everybody knows what's going on. But so we have to separate that. So there is that love, but there's that business, and basically they do. Like you mentioned about uh, laundering cash. Now with cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, now they're more advanced, so they can do things that way. And Colombia, for instance, because the largest drug cartel. I mean, they employ villages. I mean, the villages depend on them. That's why we cannot get rid of it. Of course, there is a demand, but the supply, they feed their own communities very well, employ them, and it's all about economics. So in that case, morality is, well, it's not hurting us. It's that rich white boy sitting in California is using, good for him, thank God. Yeah, it's okay. They can survive. So let's feed them so we can survive here because of the poverty and other things. So that's why they cannot get rid of these cartels because there's just so much support. The same thing with the gangs. In any disadvantaged community, there is that closeness. Like I think you had mentioned, the cousin is part of it. I'm not gonna rat on them or not tell the police. Or there's the son or the brother, or so this community has to support each other. And how can you stop that if there is that such a glue and that chain? It's very difficult to break it. So the police becomes part of the problem, unfortunately, because they say, well, if you cannot defeat them, what they say, they just join them. So hopefully those
right. If you can't beat them, join them.
who can beat them, yeah, just join them. So, but I know in South America that's what's going on.
Yeah.
But it is fascinating. One last thing about you mentioned about the goodness of people, how they, the other day I was driving to LAX, and you know how crazy the freeways are in California. You have 6 or 7 lanes. But one thing I noticed, Dr. Laurie, talking about the system and the rules. There are like millions of people drive every day. They're on that freeway, and I'm driving. Maybe we see one or two accidents, but you don't see many accidents because everybody follows their path. And when I'm driving, they're in front of me. I don't know they're black, they're white, they're Orientals, they are whatever ethnicity, if they are whatever religions they have, they are short, they are long, I mean tall, they are old, young. Everybody respects what they are doing. And that's why sometimes we talk about discrimination. I think when you put, as a human beings, we were not born to be racist or discriminatory. We all respect what we are doing. And that's why it was like amazing. I went to LAX and I said, man, yeah, you do see few accidents. It could be one curve. We always have anomalies. Somebody drives zigzags, but the majority of people follow their path and nobody deviates that. So it shows in our heart we are law-abiding citizens. We like the rules as long as it's clear. I'm not supposed to be on the middle of the lane, and we are all good people. I don't want to go hit somebody else's car just because I have my own life. I want to get to LAX, and
Right.
everybody has a path. So, and that's one of the reasons. I mean, you have to be wise. Like they say, well, 1 or 2 in the morning, you don't want to drive because there could be people who've been partying and maybe they've been drinking or they're falling. Forget about the partying. You can be sleepy. And I know I used to work so many hours till 3 a.m. and I would be tired. And sometimes driving was not the best way to do it, but you can be tired. So you don't want to do late at nights. You will be careful with what other people do. But generally, in regular time, people are good. Again, that's my my observation. Even with the gang members, like you said, they don't want to be there, but
That's
the
right.
circumstances have taken them. So
Exactly. So I cannot believe we've talked for a whole hour
wow.
practically
I
on
wonder.
something that we have no experience. We just know about. So
Yeah,
we always qualify that. We're not, we know that it's out there and we talk about it. And we're just here to raise the level of awareness. Raise the level of awareness. And I'll end with, I remember my first trip to London, England, many years ago in the 70s. And I was just a young adult. And I'm walking down and I see these two homeless people at the time on a park bench. And all I could think of was there was a time, it was two men. And I thought, wow, there was a time when that was somebody's little boy. Now, what happened? There was a time when that mother held that little boy in her arms, no matter what the circumstances. And then here he is. So that's how I approach life. And I see people, I don't see who they are. I see who they could be. And then I run with that. It's kind of like when you're renovating a house. Some people would, if that wall was apple green, that would look really great. And if we put a red carpet in that bedroom, that would look terrific. Well, I like to do that with people.
mm-hmm.
And I do it with people. And that's what one, I think, of my gifts. But knowing that innately and intuitively, we didn't come here a bad seed. So there are bad seeds out there, there's for sure. So we just have to keep being the light in the dark places and giving people hope and encouragement that they can be their best version of themselves. And Sylvia just put a comment up. My friend said this show is very informative and interesting. We are all equal. Yes, LA traffic is more organized than many areas. Maybe LA traffic is more organized than Drayton Valley, Alberta. What do you think of that? That might be the case.
Well, I've driven on both, but
That's right.
no, it gets crazy. I mean, yeah, but
I know.
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Well, we'll be back tomorrow. We're doing a pre-recorded show for the press box tomorrow morning for 9 a.m. So I'm working on that later today. And we just want to wish you a very safe and
Thank you.
prosperous journey and come back safely to us before the Christmas holidays.
Yes.
And you take care of yourself.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. You've been watching the Today Show here on the Disability Channel. We've been streaming live on Laurie Davis' Facebook page, also our YouTube channel, Laurie Davis Show Host. So what we're going to do for the new year, we're really going to start a big campaign where we want you to be subscribing to our YouTube channel and sharing our show. And so you can do that from the Facebook page, because we might have said something here today that could support and encourage someone else that you know. So hopefully we've done that for you, and now you can do it for others. It's like the old shampoo ad: 2 friends tell 2 friends tell 2 friends. Bye for now. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.